Hi everyone, here's the Book Chemist once again. Today I'm reviewing The Wind-Up Bird Chronicle, a book that follows the same pattern I've identified in a lot of the Japanese fiction that I like. The first half of this story is quietly surreal, it's quite eerie, and it's mysterious in a rather subdued way. And then the second half goes completely batshit. This happens a lot in Final Fantasy games, where usually an already fairly far-out premise is complicated halfway through with some kind of interdimensional witch invasion. It happens in a lot of the manga series that I like. It's something that I witness in a lot of Japanese fiction. Let me know if you've noticed the same, if it's actually a thing. Murakami is one of the authors you guys ask me about the most, but before I delve into this review, I should probably mention that I was on the fence about reading this novel after I found out that the edition I have in my hand, the vintage edition translated by J. Rubin, is actually an abridged translation of the Japanese original. Some chapters were shortened in the English version, the order of a few of the passages in the novel was altered. It's not quite the same as what Murakami wrote in the original. I was really surprised when I discovered this, and I was very uncomfortable with the idea of reading an incomplete translation, but at the end of the day, I had the book around, I had it on my shelf, I was curious about it. I will say that having read the novel, I kind of understand why the publisher made the decision to adapt the novel in this way. But I should definitely mention it in case reading an abridged translation is something that makes you uncomfortable. You should probably know about it before you start tackling a 500-page novel. The Wind-Up Birds Chronicles plot starts from a very simple premise. The protagonist's cat has disappeared, and he goes looking for it in an overgrown alley at the back of his house. Very soon the plot starts to thicken though, mediums get involved, dire accusations are moved against the brother-in-law of the protagonist, he keeps receiving strange phone calls, and fairly soon, to be honest, the wheels fall off the plot altogether, and sooner than you think, the protagonist is spending a few days at the bottom of a well for no apparent or at least no rational reason. This non sequitur aspect, however, the apparent disconnectedness of many strands in the Wind-Up Birds Chronicle, is only apparently just a matter of mere randomness, and I think is actually linked quite deeply to one of the key philosophical reflections of the novel, the idea that life itself is actually, it is rarely logical and rarely follows a perfectly causal pattern. And very often our own stories, our own existence, they follow patterns that seem a bit irrational, a bit illogical, a bit hard to puzzle out. The book's tone, which is slow and deliberate, with lots of attention paid to the protagonist's routine, to the meals he prepares, to the activities he does around the house. Very early on, we learn that he has this habit of ironing shirts whenever he feels stressed. This slowness and this deliberate attention to these things is very appropriate to talk about someone like Toru, the protagonist, who has recently left a job that was well paid, relatively decent, but wasn't truly satisfying, and who is now trying to figure out what to do with his life. He is not in too much of a hurry when it comes to finding a new job, but he is not really enjoying or relishing his free time either. I think it would be reductive to say that the Wind-Up Birds Chronicle is a fantastical treatment of a quarter-life crisis, but I don't think it would be entirely false to say that. These fantastical and eerie elements in the book that I keep mentioning, I found them more puzzling than they're fascinating or charming. This is not a weird novel in the way Rachel Ingalls' Mrs. Caliban is a weird novel, a novel where a frogman's appearance in the protagonist's life is used to talk about a woman's marital and midlife crisis and about her recovery from a difficult situation. Instead, Wind-Up Bird's weirdness feels highly metaphorical, even dreamlike, with the precise boundary between what's plausible and what's supernatural, often feeling slippery and, to be honest, often feeling beside the point. There might be a lot of significance, for instance, to the fact that a lot of the weird elements in the book seem to come in two. We have Creta and Maltacano, we have cinnamon and nutmeg, we have two meaningful wells in the story. This duality might mean a lot, it might not mean anything at all. Who's to say? Through all of these metaphors, all of these dreamlike elements, the Wind-Up Bird's Chronicle actually talks about things, matters that are both philosophical, they're personal, but that are among the most significant and most important that can be explored through fiction. This is a book, for instance, about trauma, about physical and psychological violence and its effects on a person's emotional life and on their growth. It talks about the impossibility of fully knowing other people, no matter how close to them we are, the impossibility of really appreciating their own inner lives. It talks about the difficulty when it comes to helping the people we love in their moments of greatest distress and difficulty and struggle. I enjoyed the Wind-Up Bird's Chronicle a lot. It's a slow and meditative book that, with a somewhat meandering plot, that nevertheless never really feels boring or never really overstays its welcome. I liked the rather opaque ending too. I wasn't really expecting anything different or anything neater, although I can see how some readers might not be entirely satisfied with the ending we get in this novel. I had the same issue when reading this novel, which I also had when reading Norwegian Wood. I found the portrayal of some of the women characters a little simplified and a little objectified, maybe highly sexualized. Some of the women characters, their actions seemed dictated mostly by their bodies, by their periods, by their desire, rather than by a complex inner life that was portrayed convincingly in the novel. I did at the same time think that the character of Mei Kazahara, a teenager that Toru befriends very early in the novel, is actually the most rewarding aspect of the entire novel. Mei Kazahara is a very strange kid who might be an absolute psychopath or might just be a kid posing, acting tough to cope with the fact that she's going through a moment of crisis. And it's quite difficult at times to really figure her out throughout the book. But her story and her evolution in the novel was a very warm, very rewarding aspect of a novel that is at times otherwise a little aloof, a little cold. What did you think of the Wind-Up Bird Chronicle? Are you uber fans of this novel? Do you prefer some others of Murakami's novels? Do you think the points I made are valid? Do you disagree with any of them? I look forward to discussing it with you in the comment section. As I mentioned, Murakami is one of the authors I get asked about the most, so I'm curious to talk about it, really. And I'm happy I read the novel. Kafka on the Shore, probably my next Murakami, who's to say? Thanks so much for watching the review, that's always awesome. Thank you to my patrons for supporting the YouTube channel. Bye everybody.